Hello, everybody. This is Gary Matheny. Happy to see you all here today. It is February 2025, and I am going to explore today on Liberty Observatory the Abrahamic covenant. I had brought it up in the past when I studied the Midianites about how the Midianites had been blessed and how they had been cursed, depending upon how they related to the Israelites. Take, for instance, Jethro. He was blessed. He was good to Moses, and Moses was good to him. But the Midianites in general did not serve the true and living God. They served a pagan god, Baal Peor, who was a particularly horrendous pagan god with sacrifice, with a lot of weird rituals that were sexually oriented. And so they did not bless the Israelites. They persecuted the Israelites in general. They went to war with the Israelites. So if you want to know more about the Midianites, I had just finished a very long session, 4-session on the Midianites, probably more than what you want to know. Even though I know very little about the Midianites, I may be one of the foremost experts on Midianites on YouTube because nobody else really gives a care about the Midianites. But one of the things that we investigated was the Abrahamic covenant. And so I wanted to explore that more deeply in this session. Now, it'll be 1, 2, or 3 sessions because I have broken it down. Who was Abraham? In session 1, it'll be to the Jews, which will spend some time in the Old Testament about who Abraham was to the Jews. And then we will do to the Christians, who Abraham was to the Christians, and we will explore mostly New Testament verses in that regard. And then thirdly, to the Muslims. Who is Abraham to the Muslims? And we'll explore some of the writings as it relates to the Islamic faith. And then in session 2, or maybe session 3, depending upon how long things last, I'm going to give advice to the Jews, advice to the Christians, and advice to the Muslims based upon my belief in this Abrahamic covenant. And so we are going to start with who was Abraham to the Jews? Who was he to the Jews? Well, first of all, as we've studied, he started out as being Abram, which was exalted one. And then when he was renamed by God Abraham, it meant the father of many nations, the father of nations. And so his name was changed, his calling was changed, his purpose and the will of God was changed, at least partly due to his obedience, and at least partly due to his obedience relating to his son Isaac, the child of the promise. But let's start here with Genesis chapter 9, because we're going to give you a little bit of background to give you an understanding of Abraham. Where was Abraham in the scheme of things? Well, he was a descendant of Moses. And I'm using very rough figures here. he basically has lineage from Moses, and Moses' son Shem, Shem, and Moses, using rough time periods, is about 3,000 BCE, before the Common Era. And Abraham was about 2,000 BCE, before the Common Era. But we're going to see here in reading Genesis chapter 9 that Abraham was a descendant of Shem, who was the son of Noah. So let's start off, as I said, in Genesis chapter 9, verse 8. And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, And I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, of the fowl, of the cattle, every beast of the earth with you, from all that go out of the ark, to every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you, and neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of the flood, neither shall there any more be a flood to destroy the earth. And so you can see that God started this pattern of a covenant. And his initial covenant was spoken unto Noah, that there would no longer be any massive flood to destroy the earth. We'll skip over now to verse 15. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of the flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy the flesh. Verse 18, And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan. So the father of the Canaanites is Ham. Verse 21, that starts the process where Noah had too much to drink. And he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. So he apparently laid in his tent as a drunken man and did not cover himself. Verse 22, And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without. See, he went and told others about it. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. So both Shem and Japheth saw that there was a certain amount of humiliation associated with their father's drunkenness and laying in the tent naked. But they covered their father. They covered the sin, so to speak. And then when Noah awoke, starting in verse 25, and he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall be unto his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. Canaan shall be his servant. So there became a curse on Canaan and the descendants of Canaan. Remember, they occupied the promised land when the Israelites took the promised land over many, many years and many, many setbacks. But they were the occupiers of Canaan, and eventually they were dispersed. They were defeated. So now we're going to follow the lineage down from Shem to Abraham. So we're going to skip ahead to Genesis chapter 11. And I'm going to read these pretty summarily. Starting in verse 10, Genesis 11, starting in verse 10. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And so we're following the legacy of Shem. Shem was blessed by Noah for his act of saving his father from humiliation. And we'll read this. This all goes down to verse 26, and I'll just summarily read them. Verse 12, and Arphaxad lived 530 years and begat Salah. Salah lived 30 years and begat Eber. Eber lived 40 and 30 years and begat Peleg. Peleg lived 30 years and begat Ru. Ru lived 230 years and begat Serug. Serug lived 30 years and begat Nahor. Nahor lived 9 and 20 years and begat Terah. And the Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram. So there's the name Abram. So direct lineage from Noah to Abram. And remember, we're reading when they beget their children. We're not saying how long they lived, but this is when they beget their heirs. And so there's a direct lineage, according to this particular chapter, between Noah and Abraham. Then we'll skip ahead here to verse 31. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and he went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldee to go to the land of Canaan, that they came into Haran and dwelt there. And as I understand, basically the area of Iraq and the Middle East falls in to all this. So it's hard for me to delineate specifically exactly where the land of Canaan is. But if you remember, there was a drought in Canaan, and the Israelites wound up in Egypt, where they were enslaved for many, many years. And so here's Abram taking his wife and going into the land of Canaan. Genesis chapter 12. And now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house in the land that I will show thee. And this is, the Lord's marching orders, so to speak, to leave the land of Ur and proceed to the land of Canaan. Verse 2, And I will make thee a great nation, I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curses thee, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And so here's the blessing, and here's the cursing that God set upon Abraham. If you bless Abram, you shall be blessed. But if you curse Abram, you shall be cursed. And God was setting forth the opportunity that all the families should be blessed from Abram. Verse 7, And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there built an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And so Abram is starting to recognize and take earnestly his relationship with God. He has the covenant with God, that those that bless him would be blessed, and those that would curse him would be cursed in kind. If those that bless Abraham not only will be blessed by God, but they'll be blessed by the Israelites. So let's skip ahead now to Genesis chapter 17. And this is where we're going to have the formality of the change in Abram's name to Abraham. Verse 1, And when Abraham was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the mighty God, walk before me, and be thou perfect. And I will make my covenant between me and thee, and will multiply thee exceedingly. And Abram fell on his face, and God talked to him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. And here it is. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, which is exalted father, but thy name shall be Abraham, the father of many nations. For a father of many nations have I made thee. Verse 6, And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of these, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee, in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and to the seed after thee. Verse 8, And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. And so Abram becomes Abraham, and he has this covenant with God. And this covenant, the heart of the covenant, relates to blessing and cursing. If you will bless the Israelites, you shall be blessed. If you curse the Israelites, you shall be cursed. So let's skip ahead now to Genesis 18. Genesis chapter 18. And this is a further encounter that Abraham is having. Verse 1, chapter 18 of Genesis. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him, and when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground, and said, My Lord, now I will have favor in the sight. Pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. And so he's resting in a tent, referring to Abraham. He encounters these 3 men, and he is having a spiritual encounter. And he asks, verse 3, If now I have found favor in thy sight, shall not pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant. And here's verse 5, And I will fetch a morsel of bread and comfort ye your hearts. After that you shall pass on. Therefore are you come to your servant? And they said, So do as thou hast served. So he is serving the servants of God. Now these 3 encounters, these 3 individuals he encountered, could have been angelic presence, but he serves the servants of God. Verse 10, And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent door, which was behind him. Verse 12, And therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I am waxed old shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also. So this, in my opinion, is the first time, really, that Sarah is brought into this covenant, this Abrahamic covenant. And so Abraham was having encounters with God. And so her first reaction was to laugh. Notice there's no record of Abraham laughing. But Sarah was like, I'm old, I'm past child-rearing years, this is a joke. But you had to look past your circumstances and look through the eyes of faith at the promises of God. Now, verse 16. And so we're still talking about the 3 men. And Sodom and Abraham, the men rose up from thence. Abraham had served them, and looked toward to Sodom, and Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he has spoken. And then this is a pronouncement against the judgment against Sodom and Gomorrah. And here we see Abraham. He had a relative, Lot, in Sodom. And so we see Abraham in his intercessory role on behalf of the people. Verse 22, and the men turned their faces from thence and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou destroy the righteous with the wicked? And so Abraham is interceding on behalf of the people. And then it goes, 50 righteous people within the city. And we have 45 righteous people within the city, 40 righteous people in the city, 30 righteous people in the city, 20 righteous people in the city. And then if there was 10, the Lord said he would not destroy it. And so Abraham was pleading, that basically said, Lord, if there are 50 righteous people, 40 righteous people, 30 righteous, and so it kept working its way downward. If you got 10, verse 13 said, and the Lord went his way, and soon as he had left communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned into his place. So the Lord turned his wrath away from Sodom and Gomorrah, partly because he had that Abrahamic covenant with Abraham. He had that covenant with Abraham. And Abraham was able to intercede on behalf of the people. So now we're going to step forward a little bit, because we know that Abraham and Sarah had a child, and their firstborn child, the child born of the promise, was Isaac. And so we're going to get into the story of Isaac a little bit by skipping ahead to Genesis chapter 22. Verse 1, and it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. And he said, take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I shall tell thee. Verse 6, and Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they were both of them together. And Abraham said, verse 8, Abraham said, my son, God will provide a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both together. Because in verse 7, Isaac's saying, hey, where's the sacrifice? And Abraham is saying, the Lord will provide. The Lord will provide. Verse 11, and the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. Verse 12, and he said, lay not thy hand upon the lad, and neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. Verse 14, and Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh. It is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. And Jehovah Jireh means the Lord shall provide. The Lord shall provide. Because if I would have been more fully explaining this story, I would have included the ram in the thickets, because the Lord provided a ram in the thickets. Abraham first had to look up by faith to see the ram in the thickets, and that became the sacrifice. And so the Lord tested Abraham found that Abraham was willing to give all that he had, his beloved son, to be faithful to God. Verse 15. We'll skip verse 16. And said, By myself have I sworn, saith the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. And so this Abrahamic covenant is being furthered. It's being deepened. Thou hast obeyed my voice. And so Abraham's faith was perfected by his obedience, by his willingness to essentially forsake all, to have this relationship with God, because he knew there was something special about it. He didn't want to let it go, and he was willing to leave everything. And yet God is a good God. God is a merciful God. And God saved him from sacrificing Isaac and provided a suitable sacrifice, which was the ram in the thicket. And so we're seeing this whole covenant being deepened. We're seeing it being more fully understood by Abraham, and we're seeing it reiterated time and time again. Because in verse 18 it says, In thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. And so the Lord is going back time and time again and reinforcing that Abrahamic covenant. So now we're going to go to Genesis chapter 25, and we're going to end it today after who is Abraham to the Jews. And we'll pick up next episode. We'll do who is Abraham to the Christians and who is Abraham to the Muslims. But first of all, let's go to Genesis chapter 25, verse 4. And the sons of Midian, Ephah and Epher and Hanok and Abidah and Aldiah, all these were the children of Keturah. So all these were the children of Keturah. Midian was the father of the Midianites. Keturah was Abraham's second wife, because Sarah had passed away. In verse 7, and all these are the days of years of Abraham's life, which he lived, 115 years. So I don't know whether, and I don't believe they measured years the same way we do now, but 160 is, I think, about 175 years old. Verse 8, and when Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, the old man, full of years, and was gathered to his people. So Abraham is blessed, but the whole earth is blessed. But it was a conditional blessing. It wasn't like God was saying, you all will be blessed regardless of what you do. The blessing was conditional. It was conditional upon, I will bless those that bless you, and I will curse those that curse you. And so if you as a Gentile, which I am, bless the Israelites, I shall be blessed by God. And furthermore, the scripture says that they, the Israelites, the Jews, will be a blessing to me. God bless them. They are holding the oracles of God, the law. And so we should be thankful for the Abrahamic covenant, because we as believers have been benefactors, beneficiaries of that Abrahamic covenant. So next time we'll do who is Abraham to the Christians and who is Abraham to the Muslims. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it very much.